Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on how to deal with hecklers. I often work with people who say that when they're talking on contentious topics or they're trying to generate a change, a new way of thinking, they struggle with people who object to what they're saying or they disagree with them strongly. And we can put that in the broad term of hecklers. Now, I don't mean people who boo you and the real severe hecklers, but how do you deal with someone who in the room is a little bit difficult, that has the potential to draw the attention away from you as the speaker towards them, so they become the center of attention, and sometimes hijack your agenda, hijack your message. So I've got some tips on how you can deal with hecklers. Feel free to use any combination of these tips. So it doesn't have to be all of them. It doesn't have to be one or the other. All right. So let's get started. For those of you who haven't been on webinars before, please ask questions. I will pause every now and then, but do not wait for me to pause. You can also type in comments such as, I had this person who heckled me once and I just did not know what to do. After dinner speaking when there's alcohol involved is a difficult one, and I can briefly touch on that. Take notes, but more importantly, think about what I'm saying and apply it to your own unique situation. Have you been heckled in the past? Do you have something coming up that you're a little bit worried about? And can you put a strategy in place to reduce your risk of being heckled? And if you are heckled, to manage those heckles a little bit more effectively and calmly, while staying true to yourself and to your topic and the rest of the audience. Let's get started. So first of all, I'm going to go through these one by one. Preparation is important. One of the strategies is to praise the person that has a different perspective or is heckling you. Find some point of agreement. So while we don't agree on the way forward, we do agree that something needs to happen. Anticipate tricky questions, left field questions, contentious questions. Sometimes the best way to deal with hecklers is to acknowledge that you need to find out and get back to them. Agree to discuss after the presentation, so take it outside of the room. And good morning, Craig. We're just getting underway, so you haven't missed anything. So we have 4 people, Craig, Stephen, and Sarah, and Jen. So you can agree to get your hecklers to deal with it after the presentation. And the 7th tip is to involve them. Sometimes they're just seeking attention. And if you involve them in some way without handing over the entire agenda to them, but just involve them in some way, that will often neutralize the heckler, the troublesome person in the room, and it will sometimes even placate them and make them feel good and scratch the need that they need to have scratched. Let's get started. So preparation is important. One of the things that I would really like to stress is the best thing you can do for any presentation is to scope the way you're going to run it. And by doing this and putting it up front, you can minimize the risk of hecklers affecting you. So I've already outlined how I'm going to deal with questions. Please type questions in as you go and I'll answer them. Every now and then I'll also pause. So if you have a contentious topic, up front in your introduction, you can point out that you will not be answering any questions or taking any comments until the end of your presentation. So please can you hold those comments, those presentations till the end. So if a heckler interrupts, you can shut them down straight away respectfully, because everyone in the room has agreed with your rules. So I'm here for a very short time. I've got a lot of information I want to cover. Please hold your comments to the end and I'll deal with all comments at the same time. All right. Someone starts to heckle you. Look, I did say, can you please hold your comments to the end? You can only do that if you've scoped it out front and you've prepared the audience for the way you're going to deal with any breaches of your rules. Another rule is limit the number of questions. So we have a lot to cover. Can I just get you all to agree of one question per person? I want to give as many people an opportunity to speak as possible. So the first question from a person, you handle honestly, you deal with it, but they keep coming back. They want to have another bite at the cherry and they move into a heckler. But because you've set the rules up front, you can now shut them down respectfully. Look, thanks, Peter, for that second question. I've got other questions in the room. I did let you know, one question per person. So please just hold that question. Happy for you to email me, but I want to move on. Another kind of rule or preparation is what you're going to talk about and what you're not going to talk about. So I'm going to talk about the rollout, the operational side of the new National Disability Insurance Scheme. I am not here to talk about the budget or the financial constraints. So if you have any questions around the money side of things, you need to go to your personal funder to find out about the money. But I'm going to talk about the rollout and I guess the operational side of things. So when someone says, but my budget's already stretched, my child's not getting enough money, how can I survive on that amount of funds? I can kind of shut them down respectfully because I've prepared and put the rules out front. So that's one way of minimizing your risk of hecklers. The other thing around preparation is ask yourself what question or what comment do I not want to have during my presentation? And secondly, ask yourself what comment or what question, if I get asked it, will make me feel very, very uncomfortable. Prepare your scripted answers for those questions because you know someone will ask those difficult questions. And that's preparation by knowing who's in the room. Some of the people are opposed to your opinion, your way forward. What knowledge, what data, what information are you going to use to mitigate those hecklers? All of that is preparation. The next little tip is just to praise them. And in praising them, you can say, wow, you really are well read. You know a lot of information about this. And I acknowledge that I don't know everything about this area and I can only comment on what I know, but you really are across the issue very well and you raise a valid point. Thank you for asking that question. Thank you for putting forward that different point of view, that different perspective. What I'm here today is to talk about such and such. I really appreciate your contribution. Sometimes when you acknowledge people and you give them praise, that will help them feel appreciated. And every now and then, be aware that some people will raise a very valid issue that you had not thought of. And we know about customer feedback. When someone makes a complaint, it's meant to be a gift. It's an opportunity for you to change, to improve your quality of service, to make sure that issue, that problem doesn't occur again. Now, there are those people you can never keep happy and those, fictitious complaints, but there are those ones that, wow, I did not know that caused people problems. So when someone asks a question left field, they kind of heckle you a little bit, you can praise and acknowledge them. And maybe you can take it on board also and say, thank you for putting that new perspective on. I haven't thought of it. I'm unable to respond to you today. And then you go away and you build that capacity around the new issue, the new angle, the new idea that's been brought up by this person who doesn't agree with you, whether they're an outright heckler or just a contrarian. So praise them. The next one is around finding some point of agreement with your heckler. So what you'll sometimes find is that they're going down a tangent, they don't agree with you, but what is the common ground? And if you can establish that common ground, that point of agreement, and then it may be okay to disagree on the way forward. So it might be, look, at least would you agree with me that the status quo is not acceptable, that something has to change? We can't keep on doing the same thing over again and losing money, our shareholders' money, our members' money. We do have to do something. You'd have to agree with that. So when you find that point of agreement, whatever that is, you can then have a base to say, okay, so I'm now talking about one strategy that I think from my experience will work. That common ground then shows that at least you're working towards the same thing. And you might have to explore that common ground. You might have to try and find out, well, what do you agree with? And you might have to do a question. So what is the big issue for you? And when you hear them, find out those one or two things that you can then lay down as the basis for common ground. You have to be careful. If you ask them open questions, you're handing the floor over to them. So sometimes closed questions are better. And would you agree that the status quo is not acceptable? And that's kind of a yes or no. And if they start going into a big dialogue, just the palm down. Look, would you agree that the status quo is not acceptable? And get them to that yes or no. And then you can move on. So that's find some point of agreement with your heckler. Just going to go back to a couple of slides. Talking about preparation, one thing that I know a keynote speaker does in terms of preparation, and he does some after dinner presentations. So conference, it's the conference dinner, lots of drinks, pre-dinner drinks, meal, then more alcohol during the meal, and now he's on to entertain them and inspire them. And one of the things he does with the bigger events and where there's alcohol involved, he briefs the bouncer or the floor staff or the venue staff that if any particular person gets too loud or too rowdy or out of control and he feels unsafe or he feels that it's going to be disruptive to the other people, he has a signal that he lets the bouncer, the doorman, the security guard, the bar staff know, and they will quietly escort that person out of the room. So that's another way of being prepared. And after dinner speaking can be a tough gig. All right, I'm just going to pause for a moment. Are there any questions? So thanks, Stephen. What if the heckler just will not agree with you on any point? Then I would go back once again to your purpose up front. And most people in the room are there to learn from you around the topic you're going to talk on. And if they're there just completely to disagree with you and to pull you down and to try and discredit you, you just need to move on and focus to the majority of the people that are there, in fact, to see you, because you've sent out a flyer, there's been some advertisement, and people are coming to hear what your point of view is on, the relatively safety of childhood immunization and the common myths about childhood immunization, which may be that it increases your chance of autism or something like that. And you have some hecklers that are really anti-vaccination, but the majority of people are there to learn from you. So you would have to say, look, I'm not here to talk about the pros and cons and whether, anti-vaccination, it should be a choice. I'm here to talk to you simply about what are the minimal risks of vaccination, and what are some of the myths around the world that people like anti-vaxxers put forward, and the medical evidence. I'm just going to go through the medical evidence. So, yeah, there are those tough ones where you get a complete person where there is no common ground. Well, you would say there is common ground, because would, to the heckler, so you think it's okay for children to live with polio and other preventable diseases, and just go to Nepal, just go to Kathmandu and see the kids walking on their hands because their legs are twisted into figure eights from the effects of polio or other preventable diseases. Are you saying that it's okay to let our children get polio? That might be common ground, and vaccination is one way of moving forward. All right, need to move on. Anticipate tricky questions. So in preparation, one of the things I say, and that's me in Bendigo speaking, one of the things I say is walk in your audience's footsteps. A Native American saying is walk 30 moons in your enemy's moccasins before you understand them. So who's going to be in the room? What are they there for? What do they want from you? What questions are they going to ask you? And what are those tricky questions? What don't you want to be asked? And what, if you are asked, is going to make you squirm and feel uncomfortable? Michaelia Cash in Federal Parliament, a West Australian member, is facing some tricky questions about leaking a federal police raid on one of the unions. She knows what questions she's going to be asked when she sits before that parliamentary committee. She knows what questions she's going to be asked. So anticipate, prepare, have your backup questions, have your backup position. Get back to them. If they raise a point of view, throw some data or statistics at you. Have you read that report where childhood vaccination, they've done a macro study or a study of multiple papers, and this is the common finding, and you don't know? Then once again, you can praise them and thank them for bringing that to your attention, and acknowledge that you'll get back to them and find out. Let's go back to Parliament, not that I like politics or our Parliament all that much, but they have a thing called questions on notice. I will take that question on notice. I don't have the answer to that. Let me take it on notice. And they have 72 hours, 3 days, to find out the answer and get back to Parliament. So if someone asks you a question that you don't have the answer, once again, you can praise them for that really brilliant, that insightful question, and you don't have that data at your fingertips. Let me get back to you in the next 24 hours, 48 hours, whatever's a reasonable time frame. And the important thing is that you just don't, if this person asks the question, it's just my wife walking in front of the camera. If this person asks the question, that you get back to everyone in the room. One of the mistakes is people say, oh, that's a really good question, Peter. Give me your email and I'll email the answer within 48 hours. Great, I'm going to find out my answer. What about everyone else in the room who also likes my question and thinks, but I want to know as well, so make sure you get back to everyone. So that is a really good question, Peter. Let me find out, and I'm going to send your question and the answer I find out to the conference organizer, to the meeting convener, and get them to send that out to all participants in this room today. Or if I'm running my own seminar, I already have your contact details. I'm running this webinar. Any questions you have after the webinar, anything I didn't cover or you felt I glossed over, send me an email and I will get back to you, all of you. Does that make sense? Yep. Good. Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, and you're right. If our parliamentarians can do it, surely we as trainers, speakers, facilitators can also do it. All right, so get back to them. Get back to all of them, everyone in the room. Agree to discuss after the presentation. Sometimes you need to take it outside. I've seen people get quite emotional, and it's clearly not something that should be discussed in front of an audience in the first place. So just from a psychological safety perspective, you'll want to take those outside. And I've seen this in trauma debriefings and other incident reportings and critical incident management, that some people get very emotional and you need to take them outside. And if there is a heckler that has a different point of view and really wants to take you to task, and it's outside of scope. Remember, I've said I'm here today to talk about the operation, the rollout, the implementation, not the finance. And someone comes at me with their budget, they're already stretched, how they're going to fund all this, say, look, this is outside of my scope today, but I don't want to brush you aside. Come and have a chat to me at morning tea time, please, and I'll try and link you with a few people that can answer your questions. And a lot of dealing with hecklers is the way you do your body language and your tone of voice. So with respect, palms up, palms up. I really value your question. I really value your question. I don't have the answer at the moment, palms down, but let me find out for you and I'll try and get back to you. So your nonverbal communication, your respect, and the way you deal with the heckler can make a big difference. And we've all seen speakers that the question or the argument put forward by the heckler, in fact, raises their blood pressure. They react, fire from their hip, put their foot in their mouth, say something, and then they've got nowhere to go. And they not only risk losing the heckler, but they risk losing the whole audience by their disrespectful response. So one of the things I don't do with hecklers, I don't deliberately humiliate them. I don't belittle them. I don't make them look stupid. That's a stupid question. Where have you been? Or presentation. I covered that earlier on. Why are you asking me that? That's really stupid. Sit down. Sit down. Don't do that. Don't do that. Because you risk losing the rest of the audience. And if in fact that is their behavior and that is the truth, the audience will recognize that and they'll be saying metaphorically to themselves, sit down, shut up, you're an idiot, where were you, why aren't you listening? And they will kind of do that dealing with the heckler for you because you're catering to the audience's needs. So one of the things that's really important, and back to our point one, preparation, is making sure that your audience is aligned with what you're presenting. So in other words, audience expectations and your content line up perfectly. One of the problems where you get hecklers and you get disengaged audiences where you talk about this and the audience has come here to listen to that. And for some reason, the marketing's gone wrong. There's been misinformation, and I'm going merrily along my path, espousing ideas and information of which the audience has no interest. That's where you get not only hecklers, you get disengagement. So your preparation is what helps with a lot of these things. Involve them. Get them to do something for you. Ask them to find out where they got that source of information, and could they provide you with a link to that paper? Could they get back to you? Ask them some short questions. Well, how would you deal with the reoccurrence of polio or tuberculosis? Tuberculosis was almost eradicated around the world. Involve them, get their ideas. Once again, if you've got a short presentation, you've got to keep it tight. If you involve them too much, once again, they can hijack your agenda. And involve them if they're on topic, if they have an alternative view but it's valid. Don't involve them if they're off topic, they're outside of scope of what you're speaking on, in which case I would respectfully shut them down, agree to speak to them later, remind them that this is the scope of what you're going to talk about, this is your framework, and you're not going to talk about the finance side of things. So I'm going to pause for a moment. They are 7 tips that can help you manage your hecklers. I think preparation should be part of every presentation. It helps you look confident, helps you look credible when you anticipate tricky questions, when you anticipate left field comments, when you match the expectations of your audience, you walk in their footsteps. And then some of those other things around discuss after the presentation, get back to them, praise them, involve them. They're just little tools. You can Google a whole range of things around how to deal with hecklers. So a question from Steve, any resources? Look, there's a YouTube video, and we've all used YouTube, I think, and it's got Barack Obama, and he's speaking at, I think, Tel Aviv University. And he's doing a lecture, it's full. And someone walks in and starts heckling him and accusing him of stuff. And he deals with the heckler magnificently. He gets a standing ovation for dealing with the heckler. It's quite clever, and he's very respectful. And just have a look and watch the way that he does it. I use that as a resource, and I share that with people when they say, look, you know, when a heckler comes in and takes over, you know, there's nothing we can do. Well, just watch Barack Obama, and he did do something, and that was off the cuff. That was his response, very clever response. So just watch that. It's really quite clever. So Barack Obama, if you Google Barack Obama YouTube lecture in Tel Aviv or in Israel, you should see a really nice little video. It's only 2 to 3 minutes. All right, I've got upcoming workshops. I know some of you in the room are doing the Perth workshop, Winning Presentation Skills, which is 21st of November. And we're off to Shepparton and Broome. We're off to Broome next week, where we do have some vacancies. So feel free to share those workshops if you have any colleagues that you think might benefit. As I said at the start of the webinar, I do a couple of webinars every month for free. I don't just tell you what you should do and why, I also give you some how. So 13th of November, some common body language mistakes. I mentioned about your nonverbal communication in dealing with hecklers respectfully. And the other one is how to connect and build rapport. Funny that when you're in rapport and when you're connected, you have less hecklers, you have less resistance. People come in and bulldoze their point of view very early on without taking the time to be vulnerable, to share a story, to connect with me, to earn the right to ask you to move your way of thinking, to change. I just come on the platform and start. So it's the way you build rapport and connect with your audience that kind of gives you permission to take you on a journey of change, of disruption, of innovation, of something that you're not expecting. You know how to reach me. LinkedIn, invite me to connect on LinkedIn. Just put a little note that you've attended one of my webinars. And as always, I record these webinars. If you have any further, if I've gone too quick and you need more information, send me an email, and I can also send you a recording of the webinar. All right, that's all for now. Over and out, and I'll see you at the next webinar.